Okay, this is Dr. Masum Islam welcoming you to my literary channel, Literaria, Miscellanea. And today we're going to discuss the most, weighted and the most important topic in respect to Bihar, BSTET and BPSC, TGT-PGT English exams. In your prescribed syllabus from English, you have history of British English poetry, a history of British English drama, history of British English fiction, non-fiction, literary criticism and theory, American literature, Northeast Indian literature, Indian literature, African American literature, etc. etc. So Bihar State is supposed to take questions from mostly from British English literature from the Old English period to the modern postmodern period. So in this lecture, this is the first lecture from the history of English literature in accordance with the syllabus given in the BSTET board, and the syllabus is the first one is the history of British English poetry. So here is the history of British English poetry for the BSTET and BPSC 2024 TGT-PGT subject English. So first that we need to look back or need to memorize the literary period is the Anglo-Saxon period or the Old English period. You all have much or lesser have known about the basic features of Old English period. I here will try to give very precise introduction or very precise description of the period in chronological order. First, the background. Anglo-Saxon period begins in 450 and ends with the Norman conquest of France, the region of Normandy of the King William. So 450 is the beginning point of the Old English poetry, and 1066 is the ending of this poetry. As you all know that no such dates can be attributed to divide or to fragment a social or literary change, but for the sake of convenience one need to set a historical or social event, important event to mark the beginning or end of that period. So the the Old English period begins with the 450 AD. What happens in 450 AD? Yes, this is the background. In 450 AD, there were the tribes, the barbarian tribes that came England and ostracized, outcast the native Englanders, native Britons from the island that is called now England or the whole Britain, and the barbarian invaders, the Angles, the Saxons and the tribes for the Teutonic. That time the German country was not made, the nation was not made, the whole area was under the territory of Russia, so the whole region is called Teutonic. The term Teuton is come from this region. So the Teutonic tribes came there and invade the land, the island, and amalgamated with the local tribal peoples, and they tried to create a culture, a fashion that is linguistically, that is culturally, that is, traditionally different from the earlier, tribal culture, and it becomes an instrumental for the native peoples. So there was a pidgin like or the Creole like language from the native dialects and the invaders dialect. So there is a mixture of language, culture, and therefore the people from this land was very much fragmented. Okay, in the meantime, the legendary King Arthur, it is believed there was no mention of such historical event, but it is believed that King Arthur and his round table was there to defend England and to some extent, defended England from the outsiders, from the barbarian invaders. And then came the Roman preachers who Christianized the England or the Englanders from pagan religion to Christian religion, and it was happened in 597 AD by Saint Augustine from Rome. All right, from this period onwards, Christianization begins, and the usage of Roman language, Latin influence were shown in the text afterwards. And by the time the Christianization made progress and tried to convert the local tribes, local native peoples into Christianization, the invaders, the outsider invaders repeatedly attacked the land through Vikings, through the Danish invaders. And it happens from 8th century to 10th century AD. The Vikings came in 790 AD and made Danish or Danish law, Danelaw in England. And after Danish ruled or the Danish law started ruling the local peoples, the mixed peoples from various tribes, the one native brave king Egbert, in 1802, united the nation and regained the kingdom from the Danish rule. And hence the attack of barbarians to some extent get defended. Afterwards, we all know the King Alfred the Great was there, and he to some extent was able to unite the nation and made progress in all aspects, culturally, socially, literally, and in education and in translation in Old English language. he used to emphasize the local dialects, not the other language, King Alfred the Great. And he emphasized the translation, the chronology of the history of English from Roman civilization to 10th century, 12th century civilization. And this is what happened within the successive period of time. And by the time 1066 came, the Edward, the confessor of the last local or the last Britain king, died without an heir. And he made Harold Godwinson his will heir. But before this, there was a history, because the French king, the king of Normandy, William, was in contract with Edward the Confessor in the middle of 11th century. And then they decided that if Edward the Confessor dies, then William will succeed the kingdom of British. But in the meantime, King Harold Godwinson came as a disputer, and hence William from Normandy invaded again in England and captivated King Harold, and finally able to win the land in 1066, and the battle was called the Battle of Hastings. All right, this is all about Old English period historical background and the chronology. After that, the Norman conquest begins. In that period, background is over. Now the chronology, 410 AD, the Roman legions were withdrawn from British land because of the internal conflicts raised in Roman Empire. All right, 450 Germanic tribe, Germanic Angles, Saxons, Jutes came and captured the land. All right, then in the meantime, between 450 to 550, there were King Arthur, the legend. The story of King Arthur was there. He managed to defend his land from the outsider barbarians. All right, then Christianization begins, and 597 Christianization begins in Britain through Saint Augustine. All right, then again then succeeding attacks from the various invaders, barbarian tribes continued in the land of England, and the major one is 790s, the Vikings. 719, the Vikings. Then the King Edward all right, defended. Then Alfred the Great King was there. Then in finally 1066, Norman conquest was done by the King William from Normandy upon the King Harold of the Britons. Finally, the Battle of Hastings. Okay, this is the all chronological order. Now, if you now again went back to poetry section, as we are discussing about the history of British English poetry, so we need to focus upon the poetry section or the poetry part from this period. Though most of the writings or most of the works were from poetry, and in the Old English period, in any culture or any history, the first literature used to be poetry, because poetry was the oral version of showing one's emotions, one's feelings, to contributing one's culture, one's tradition, legends, myths, mythology. So British English poetry was not exceptional. So the poetry that begins is were also following the same versions. Though it was anonymous because of the loss of many manuscripts or many records, but from some sources after 12th or 13th century, the records, the collection of poetry, of records were rescued, were found in repository, in the library or in the cathedral. So the four major collections or records were what? The Beowulf MS manuscript, where the epic poem Beowulf was written. It was all about 3100 lines, alliterative lines, in two parts, about the heroic deeds of Beowulf. All right, and the translation of Whitby was also there in the Beowulf manuscript, that is found in Cotton Vitalius, and it is preserved in British Museum. Now, the Junius manuscript. The Junius manuscript is all about the writings or the poetry of Cædmonian poems, poetry of Cædmon. The Genesis, Exodus, Daniel, Christ, and Satan. These four poems were found to be important in the Junius manuscript, and it is found in Bodleian Library in Oxford. All right. Now, the third book is the Exeter book. The Exeter book is found in the Exeter Cathedral of England, and it is known to be donated by Bishop Elfric in 1050. It is significant anthology of Old English poetry. It contains two of the signed poems of Beowulf and the other diverse range of works, including religious secular poems, riddles, elegies, homilies, and the notable books are the Seafarer and the Ruin. They are the elegies. All right. Remember the two signed poem of Beowulf And the last one is the Vercelli book. The book is in Cathedral Library at Vercelli near Milan, Rome. All right, and it is discovered in the late 19th century. The book is all about the two other signed poem of Beowulf. All right, and the Ellen Andreas, and the most allegorical poem, The Dream of the Rood, is also found in this collection, the Vercelli book. So these are the records, these are the scanty or very precious record that were found later, and these records are not dated according to their composition. So the composition by and large is altered, but one thing, the first poetry, it is believed and it is confirmed that the first poetry was the poetry of Cædmon. Hymns that written by Cædmon, and it is believed that it is written in 658 to 680 AD. So hymns, or the charming or the magical biblical stories, eulogies, were written in a verse form, and they are dedicated to Christianity, and they are hymns. And Bede, Venerable Bede, the writer of ecclesiastical history, confirmed that the hymns were the first poetry writing from a poet, written in shape of shepherd and in a dreamy method. So this is all about the poetry and the Old English, Anglo-Saxon poetry. Now the Middle English poetry, it is called the barren period of the history of English literature, because no such contributions or the bigger contributions were made. But you can see that the 4 poems, purity, patience, and the Gawain and the Green Knight, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight were written, and they are all allegory. They are all allegorical writing, and it is believed there were no such indications of the composer, of the writer. So therefore they were anonymous, but the language, the meter, and the content were very much influential, were very much elevated to one, and they are used in alliterative verse, alliterative meter. So these are all about the Middle English period. There is no such historical event, and the historical event, one historical event is this, that 1170, the Bishop Cathedral, the murder of Thomas A. Becket was done. He was assassinated. The bishop, at the time the bishop was all powerful. They were equal to God. And the assassination of Thomas A. Becket was a very, uproaring one, very ignited one. And you can find The Murder in the Cathedral, the play by T.S. Eliot, The Murder in the Cathedral. You can find the events in this play. All right. And the other one is the 1215, the Magna Carta. You know, the Magna Carta, what? The power of kingdom and the Canterbury and the bishop. Who will be the powerful? So the Magna Carta signed, or the Magna Carta, so the Magna Carta event was the important event at that period, at the Middle English period, because this is all about the power distribution between the king and the bishop of Canterbury in England. So this is all about the Middle English period. Precise, in the BSTET and BPSC perspective lecture is made. If questions will come, from this section, writing section. They are important in terms of Bihar, BSTET and BPSC English literature perspective. All right, and in general they are very informative for all and sundry. So this is what the next section. If you find it fit, you please subscribe to my channel, share it, and stay connected, and comment, of course, if some important things are left, so that I could be aware of this, and the next video will be more fruitful and more informative. Thank you.